What happened and what's next?
From the Battelle studio at WOSU at COSI, this is Columbus on the Record. Joining Mike Thompson this week, Kathy Kandinsky, State House reporter for the Columbus Dispatch, Ann Fisher, host of All Sides with Ann Fisher on 89.7 NPR News, Terry Casey, Republican strategist, and Sam Gresham, Common Cause Ohio.
Bernie Sanders said America needed a revolution. Well, we got one, and Donald Trump will lead it. Donald Trump first led an insurgency that took over the Republican Party and defeated big names like Marco Rubio, Scott Walker, and Jeb Bush. Then he did the same to ruling Democrats and Hillary Clinton.
This loss hurts, but please never stop believing that fighting for what's right is worth it. I know we have still not shattered that highest and hardest glass ceiling, but someday someone will, and hopefully sooner than we might think right now.
Hillary has worked very long and very hard over a long period of time, and we owe her a major debt of gratitude for her service to our country. I mean that very sincerely. Now it's time for America to bind the wounds of division, have to get together. To all Republicans and Democrats and independents across this nation, I say it is time for us to come together as one united people.
Kathy Kandinsky, Donald Trump opposes many core Republican issues, trade, entitlements, to be for two. He lost all three debates. He was out-fundraised and outspent. He said outrageous things. How did he win?
I think you probably have to give credit to his opponent, Hillary Clinton, for being such an unlikable candidate and such a poor candidate for him to go up against. Only slightly, higher negatives than negatives he had himself. So you had two extremely unpopular candidates going at it. And I think in the end, there's a lot of interesting stats about her underperforming in key demographics that she should have done better in. Minority vote, African-American voters, Latino voters, surprisingly more went to Trump than they expected, young voters. But ultimately, I think that Trump really tapped into these people middle-class folks who really felt they haven't been heard. And I think he really tapped into this, and he turned the whole, I think when it came down to it, exit polls showed people wanted change. And if you wanted change, aside from all the crazy stuff he said, Trump was the change guy.
He's the change.
And before he lost to Hillary, before he won, before Hillary lost to him, a whole raft of Republicans lost to him in the primary. So first he had to get through that gauntlet, and they didn't understand it any more than I think the Clinton campaign understood what was going on.
I think a lot of people underestimated Donald Trump. I have a friend who worked with him in the New York area 30-some years ago, and he reminded me Trump started his career doing a lot of community meetings, dealing with a lot of his people who were very angry, but he learned how to kind of listen, how to deal with things. And if there's one word, Sam earlier before we started asked, how do you summarize it? It'd be the word deplorables. When Hillary attacked the people who were angry as deplorables, it was just like it brought back Obama when he attacked the people in Pennsylvania clinging to their guns and religion.
Obama won re-election after that, though.
Well, but there's a lot of people didn't have a chance then to speak out. This was their chance to say to Obama and Hillary, we're tired of being put down and demeaned.
I think we're whitewashing it again. We're trying to be polite and nice and give him credit for having skills that he really doesn't have. What he did was, as Van on radio said the other day, this is a white lash. White people, and particularly working class white people, were angry. They found him as a symbol. He wasn't a tool. He didn't find anything in them. He was their lightning rod to express this anger. And they did it.
Was their anger justified, though, after the past 8 even 12, 16 years.
Well, I think the anger was justified in the Republican Party because the Republican Party had lied to them and never delivered anything they said they were going to do. But I also think there's a sense of white privilege. And, people just keep backing away from this thing. This was a vote where people of color had no involvement, people of color had no sanction, and how they felt as a part of all the things that he did and said. It's a very bad election. It's a sad election.
If you want to make it so much about race, you have to look at why did Hillary perform so well. And look, on the Friday before the election, Hillary wasn't speaking to people in rural and mid-sized towns in Ohio. She was in Cleveland with a free concert with Jay-Z and Beyonce. Free admission in a place that held 13,000 people. They could only get 11 there. Hillary didn't excite people. The black community felt she didn't offer anything.
She was in Cleveland twice in the week. That they finally got the message that there was a big problem with that constituency group. That's all.
And the turnout was way low, significantly below.
But they should have had a turnout when Strickland. They should have had knowledge when Strickland ran that they had problems in Cleveland. The whole structure in Cleveland has changed. Pinkerton is gone. All the old heads that used to make everything happen. There's a reordering of things in Cleveland, and I fault the Democratic Party. They don't really understand.
Kathy, getting to gender,
Yeah.
how much did the gender play a role in here? There was a surprising number of women who actually, educated women who voted for Trump.
Exactly. I mean, Hillary Clinton won every category of women except she lost every category of women except women with college educations. She
And that
won
margin
one.
wasn't as wide
and
as
the
you'd
margin
hoped,
wasn't
yeah.
as big. And overall, I got this down. She won women voters 54 to 42%. Given the things Trump said about women and all the concerns about his attitudes towards women that were expressed during the campaign, I find that really surprising.
And by the way,
she underperformed.
Those numbers aren't significantly different than how women voted in 2012. It's pretty much the same percentages that voted for Obama
But it's surprising to me because of
So
the
she didn't
rhetoric.
bring out more
She
women
didn't bring
to her point,
exactly.
yeah.
She did not bring more women over to her.
Well, I would argue a lot of the women issue, a lot of women, just like men, are concerned about economics. And like in
But
Ohio,
the symbolism of a female president has some significance, just
Well,
like
there's
a
symbolism,
black
but-
president had symbolism.
Well,
Forget
there's
about all the
symbolism.
symbolism when you've got a major a presidential candidate talking about grabbing women's crotches. I'm sorry, and bragging about it. It has nothing to do with whether or not the other candidate's a woman or not at that
a
point.
lot of voters are more concerned about economics than some of those
Well,
issues you're
obviously,
talking about.
Yeah, obviously, when it came time to vote, they were more concerned about the party affiliation or whatever Trump's message was than
But
they were
Kathy,
about what he
they're not going to
said.
get that. He's a flim-flam artist. There's nowhere in the world he can deliver all those things he said he's going to deliver.
Sam, the election's over, and you predicted when we did Channel 10,
God.
right before the election, you said it was going to be a landslide.
Well,
Yes,
he
it
wasn't
was, it
alone.
was.
Terry, let me ask you, when there's a change election, let's go back to the change elections that we've seen. Jimmy Carter after Watergate, Ronald Reagan after Jimmy Carter, Bill Clinton after the first George Bush, Barack Obama after the second George Bush. Partisans who won were excited and ready to rally around their candidate. Are you excited about Donald Trump as president, and are you ready to rally around him?
I'm really excited because the fact that Republicans maintain control of the Senate, there's an agenda, there's going to be a change on the Supreme Court.
Are you excited about Donald Trump as president of the United States?
I think when you look at the total package and where America was headed
Answer
and
the
how
question.
I'm excited. Yes, I think people are going to be surprised that he's going to turn out as a much better president than all the doom and gloom of these media experts had predicted.
Well, the expectations, you have to admit, are pretty low.
Right.
We'll get to that. The expectations among some are low, others are
others
high.
sky high.
Yeah, we'll
Yeah.
get to that. But anyway, let's talk about Ohio. For all the talk of Ohio losing its bellwether status, Buckeye voters put an end to that. Once again, as Ohio went, so went the nation. In the end, it was not even that close in Ohio. Donald Trump exceeded expectations of the polls and beat Hillary Clinton by more than 8 percentage points, or by nearly 500,000 votes. The key to Trump's victory was better than expected vote totals in suburban areas and huge amounts of support among or in traditional Democratic strongholds in Northeast Ohio. Sam Gresham, there is a lot of red, even more red on that map than we saw the last 2 cycles.
And I'm going to say in my response, I respect people who do well. What they did was amazing, simply amazing. Let me give you an example. Clinton won in the 3 largest areas, 1 million or so votes. But what he did in 85 counties was to get 2.2 million votes. I mean, he got everything he could get out of those counties. And he bettered the Romney numbers. He flipped some Ohio counties that had gone for Barack Obama in 12. And he brought people from every place. I mean, Monroe County was the number that jumped out at me. They got 59% of the vote. He got 72%.
And Monroe was one of 2 counties in 14 that voted for Fitzgerald against Kasich. And then I'm shocked by Dayton, Montgomery County. Trump carried that county. He carried Lorain County,
yeah.
he carried Trumbull County. I mean, the margins were huge.
Goes on Asheville, Trumbull.
Right.
Clinton only got 7 counties in Ohio. When Obama ran last time, he had 17. So she had 10 fewer counties than Obama had.
Right.
And in some of these rural areas, I think the margin in Mercer County, which is a heavy Republican county, was like up over 80% he won by.
He got it
all came out to
all.
vote.
He got everything he could get out of that.
She was here a lot. She was in Northeast Ohio a lot. She spent a lot of money on advertising. Her supporters spent a lot of money on advertising. In the end, it didn't really matter.
No, I think in the end, you got to look back and decide, was she the right candidate from the beginning? This time, if someone like Donald Trump wins the presidency in the United States, that's got to tell you something about how Hillary Clinton wasn't the right person. It doesn't make her. I mean, people say she ran a bad campaign, and there's lots of things to say about her ground game. I don't think she got out to the hinterlands enough. I think she took too long to get out there. She didn't go to Wisconsin at all after the primaries. I think.
She was chasing Texas a couple weeks out, thinking she could win
that
Texas,
sent a
which is
signal
stupid.
to a lot of people that things were going better than we thought.
Well, but it was a false
Yeah.
thing. But I want to defend Hillary a little bit. I think she only really had 2 problems. One, she had the lack of a clear message, and obviously she wasn't the right messenger because people didn't trust her.
I think my friend here has a clear point. Ann has a clear point. I don't know if she's the right candidate for this time for presidency. I don't think any Democrat, given the last few days of the campaign, would have had much of a chance against this Republican candidate, as I go back and think about it, given what the people who supported him, and
You don't think Joe Biden would have done better in the Youngstown area,
No.
being from Scranton, being more relatable to the folks that work? He
doesn't give them what these people wanted. It's somebody who's magic, shake and change, he's outside of government, and he said some things that rang their bell. I mean, keeping Muslims out of the country, building a wall, that's a certain type of bell ringing. That's
People
not
wanted
cover.
change.
It was
People
the most
wanted
apples
change.
and oranges
And-
choice people have had in I don't know how long.
Well, people wanted change, but if you look at the numbers for the U.S. Senate race, Rob Portman, of course, we pretty much knew he was going to win, and he won by what, 18 percentage points?
No, I think it's over 20 points.
21.
I mean,
Here it
it's
is here.
shocking how huge
21,
it is.
22%, 21 percentage points
that was
over.
a
Bad campaign.
But he, I mean,
No,
and
he
also
had a good campaign.
Yeah, they had a bad one.
and
Yeah.
Portman got far more votes. I think about 500,000 votes more than Donald Trump did in Ohio.
Right, but Kathy's point about this being a change election, a lot of people were not happy to have 4 more years of the Barack Obama
wouldn't have
direction of the
mattered,
country.
too.
That's what I'm
It
saying.
wouldn't have mattered, and certainly the vice president of that administration couldn't have fared much better, I
he
don't
wouldn't have
think.
done any
talked
better.
about Hillary Clinton's credentials was exactly what voters this year didn't want. They didn't want the Washington insider. They didn't want the government
But
person.
Kathy, can I ask you a question? How much being a woman had to do with that?
Well,
I think there's a lot of people that it might not show up in polling, it might not show up in conversation, but there are definitely people that aren't going to vote for someone because they're a woman. I mean, I have no doubt. So
Would they vote against her because she's a woman?
Well, but to a lot of
It's a
people,
comfort thing.
Sam, women do well because they represent change and they aren't the same good old boys
But
who've
in
always
the
been there.
ultimate power position in the world,
I don't think that's as much of an issue. I mean, you look at the leader of Germany, the leader of England. They're now back with their second woman
But
prime
it
minister.
has been an issue here, though. I mean, it has been an issue here. And
Yeah, I think it's simple. She was the first woman, but the second Clinton. And I
Yeah.
think
That's another
that's
issue.
the baggage.
That's a good
She-
point.
she
You can draw a
had
lot
more
of
baggage.
comparisons.
She had 30
Yeah.
years of
She's a-
experience.
she's a
That's a
second
good thing
Clinton.
on one
Yeah.
hand.
I think that had a lot to do with
Well,
it.
and if she was just the second Clinton, it wouldn't be too bad. But all the Clinton Foundation stuff, just
Yeah.
drip, 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 drip,
But
drip.
look at all the stuff that he had.
Yeah.
Come on now.
The Bushes, when it was like enough Bushes, we're done with the Bushes.
Right.
You kind of felt that there was a little bit of that
Clinton
attitude
thing
this
too?
time, yeah.
All right. Let's get to, okay, now what? Here are the things that Donald Trump has promised to do. Repeal and replace Obamacare, renegotiate trade deals with Mexico and Canada, knock the hell out of ISIS, quote there, appoint a special prosecutor to investigate Hillary Clinton, bring all the jobs back to places like Youngstown and Middletown, and of course, build that wall and make Mexico pay for it. Terry Casey, what's first on his list?
Well, I think the first thing in the fact that on Thursday, the meeting with Paul Ryan, the U.S. House is going to be important in the fact that I think they only lost 5 members and they were at a high level. The House is going to be the key launching point. And I think what Paul Ryan's going to do is focus on economics and things that they can agree on, work and move those. They aren't going to get everything solved.
So is it Obamacare
Well,
first?
well, that's part of it, but part of it is just the whole general economics of the federal government. There's obviously going to be lots of
But we got a
executive
problem.
orders
We
that are
got a
flushed.
problem. They don't have 60 votes in the Senate.
Well, but you get it in the House, you have a president, and remember, the new leader of the Senate is Chuck Schumer,
Let me
who's
say
an
again,
ultimate deal maker.
They don't have 60 votes in the Senate.
But the Democrats in the Senate are not all agree of
Anyways,
it.
he can make an impact right away from the executive office. He can put the kibosh on the turnaround with Cuba. He can put the kibosh on the Iran nuclear deal. These are very, very big things, big issues. He can start to turn around a lot of the Obama legacy right away, and take care of the Congress and the things that you have to be congressionally approved, down the road.
Is that going to
a lot
satisfy
of
his
people.
core supporters?
Well, that's
At
the
first.
key. I mean, just today you heard a couple people close to him, I think Rudy Giuliani, backing away from the notion that they were going to try and prosecute Hillary Clinton. That's kind of good news, because do we really want to get bogged down in that? I think people want to move forward.
Brings a good news to
But
all the people in that convention hall who kept chanting,
that-
lock her up.
That's just it. His base expects these things to happen. At least some of these things need to happen, or else he's going to have a problem with his
Oh,
base.
he's got a problem already.
But a lot of the base is happy the fact that Hillary's not president.
Well,
So she might not be locked up.
Do you
but-
really think that's going to be enough, though, with all this other stuff they
That's like
talked about?
duping them then.
Well,
That's
but
duping them.
no, if people see that the bad stuff has stopped and we're starting to move and make some progress in some
We're
other
sounding
areas.
like an echo chamber again. I like Mike's thing.
I think he's got to come in and boom, 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 get stuff accomplished, because that was his whole
not
mandate.
gonna
That
happen,
was
though.
that was his whole mandate.
It's
He's
not
got to
gonna
come
a lot
happen.
in.
of things he can do, and it's he's just got to string them out long enough, keep working on Congress,
he's
and
gotta-
get to the big
He
stuff.
has, Terry, he has freedom to, as the president has freedom to renegotiate trade deals.
Right.
Will he do that? Because the stock market's been up the past few days, but if that happens, that stock market goes down, Republicans get really antsy.
Well, there's
Will he be doing that?
renegotiate as opposed to throw it out totally. So you can change some things, you could toughen up some stuff.
And the Chinese and
whereas
Mexicans will say, yeah, we're good with that.
Well, there's ways you can do. I mean, people know you can't get everything done all at once, but if you stop the bleeding and you're moving in the right
but
direction.
Terry, he's got another problem. He's trying to make these legislative change and meet his own personal constituency base. He's got a whole different set of issues over here with trials that he's still involved with. He's got a series of businesses that are going to entangle his decision making as president. And when the press gets the relationships and understand those things, we've never had a president in a situation like this with all these business deals, and how do they affect his decision making? And then where's he going to put it? Where's the blind trust that he's going to put all these businesses in? How's he going to create that blind trust with all this garbage he
Well,
has
the
out?
former mayor of New York, Bloomberg, put it in a blind trust. There's ways to set it up. They can get it done. He's got his kids who can run the businesses.
That's not a blind trust, though, when
That's
your
not a
kids are
blind
running a
trust.
business
Well,
for
but
you.
there's ways to do it.
Structurally, a blind trust is a stock company or a manager that takes all your portfolio and manages it, and you don't have anything to do with it. Having your kids run around, still managing your business, that's not the same.
So what did Democrats do? For 8 years, well, for 6 years when they controlled Congress, they basically held up anything Obama wanted to do. Do Democrats do the same thing now?
I think they have a responsibility on key legislations to do that. Now, we have already decided we're going to give our senators a backbone. We're going to take 30 people. We're going to plop down in his office 7 times to reiterate to him that's what we want him to do.
On which issue?
Key is, let's say ACA. Let's start with that. Let's start with ACA. Let's talk about educational issues. Let's start talking. These guys are going to need backbone because in the past, like Casey has said, they've negotiated. We can't on certain things negotiate.
But Sam, there's members of the Senate, Democrats, who want to get things done, want to get business done. Believe me, they're going to start doing some things. And even though you got
You're saying they don't have any soul or any commitment to their philosophies and
I'm
principles?
saying there's some people who want to get some things done.
If Hillary had been elected, would Republican senators be saying that we want to get things done?
Well, you would have had a Republican House there, so it would be different. And it would depend on what.
They're not going to want to go along with any repeal of the ACA.
That's right.
I mean, why would they want to do that? They're going to throw millions of people off health care.
Now, infrastructure, Democrats will
they
go
could do
along with
that. They could
infrastructure.
She can cut a deal on that.
Yeah, but remember,
he can cut a
there's
deal.
repealing Obamacare and there's fixing Obamacare.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Well, repealing's easy, fixing is not so easy.
Yeah.
Because you got to agree on something.
Yeah. Supreme Court, what happens?
God, that's the one that scares me.
What's going to happen is what they predicted would happen. I mean, he's going to nominate someone right away. It's going to be someone very, very conservative by some measure, and then it's just a wait and see on who leaves
gonna go along, yeah.
and who leaves after.
Now, sadly, they'll probably cut a deal here. They probably will, but I don't know what they're going to trade for.
Well, but Sam, they're going to take care of business. We're going to get the country moving again. And there's some things that this president and the Congress could do to bring trillions of dollars that businesses have hidden overseas. You get that back.
You're missing. This is a different world now. Yeah. We live in a different America now. And what went along in the past in political deal making. Look at all them thousands of people out in the street. Look what happened last summer. Look what's going to go happen. I told you 2 years ago that this election would begin to litigate a whole set of social issues. Now, I'm going to say, be honest with you, I'm glad he's elected president because we can now litigate these social issues.
Whoever was going to win the presidency was going to have a very difficult time governing, and he's going to see that it's going to be a lot more difficult governing. These ideas that he spouted out are going to be a lot more difficult to enact. I mean, and that would have been the case.
We got to get to how we all screwed up. Hang on.
Don't put me in that category.
2016 was a campaign like no other. Foresight was nearly non-existent. Remember the days when Donald Trump was predicted to be nothing more than a punchline? Republicans thought that. We gave Donald Trump lots of airtime. Viewers could not turn away from that coverage, and most of us totally missed the anger propelled by Trump and Bernie Sanders, and we thought campaign organization, stuff like that would be important. Ann Fisher, where did we go wrong? What's the number one thing we got wrong?
Polling. Why did we go? Why did we miss it? We rely a lot on polls, and we expect these professionals to be out there, getting the heartbeat of the country, and they failed, and there's a lot of reasons why they failed, but they're going to have to go back to the drawing board. Things have changed.
Mike, I want to remind you, on this show and other shows I've said over time, I look at the detail, and I can see that in various polls done, they were overestimating the number of younger voters who would vote. They were overestimating, and they were underestimating some other groups.
Older voters and rural
voters. And part of it, the pollsters screwed up some in 12, and then they overcompensated this year, and they made some bad assumptions.
Let's move beyond polls because we only got a few minutes left. Kathy, what about the role of the organization? Hillary Clinton had the organization, was going to pave the way. What happened there?
I mean, I think she did have the good organization. I just don't think there was enough enthusiasm that her organization just wasn't as effective as it had been in the past. I was going to say that as a reporter, I think we did see the story. I think we failed to recognize it. The Dispatch went out into a bunch of regions in the state, did stories, heard all this support for Trump, and we just didn't recognize. We really kind of clung to the old ways that she was going to win big in the urban areas, and that was going to make up the difference. But when we go back and look at the stuff we reported in some of these rural counties, we should have known better. We should have listened to it.
We learned that minority voters are not a monolith. Donald Trump won almost a third of the Hispanic vote.
A huge
I'm not, and when you break that Hispanic vote down, you better be careful. I think it's primarily Cubans that they
But
made.
there were a lot of not economically disenfranchised
Right.
Hispanics that
And
voted
there's
for
a
him.
lot of Hispanics who are more conservative on social issues,
But let me,
and that was a
Mike,
difference.
let me try and respond to that. I can't do it for the Latinos in particular, but black folk voted for him too, and that's a long story. But I'm not surprised. If my answer to you is I'm not surprised.
And the African American community didn't turn out in the same percentages in Cleveland and some other areas as what they historically did for
I'm
Obama.
not going to let you blame the African American
I'm not
community.
blaming them,
Let
I'm
me
just
finish.
stating the fact.
As the big media is saying, and we're the bad guys, there was no overall enthusiasm for this candidate in a lot of
And I
quarters.
give the credit to Hillary
did not
Clinton.
Inspire the turnout. We got to get to
No.
our final off. We'd like to go on forever, but we got to get to our final off the record parting shots. And Sam, you're up first.
I think the Democratic Party, the state of Ohio, needs to re-examine itself and find a new way to get all these votes out and inspire people.
Terry.
There's already the battles on for 2018, including who will be the next House Speaker starting in 19. Two names, Larry Householder, somewhat disgraced as a former Speaker, and Keith Faber is now in the running. Now that he's going to be a House member. So the politics never stops. It's good for the next show. You got more to talk about.
I think Trump will be good for this show. Go ahead.
Just as Obama, in his first 2 years in office, had to get a lot of business done because, there's going to be that backlash 2 years later. We're going to see a lot of action or nothing at all in the next 2 years from Donald Trump. He's going to have to do it then.
Kathy.
I think you're going to see a lot fewer projections from me, a lot fewer predictions from me. We were wrong, and that's all I got to say.
I will agree with you there. I am out of the prediction business because my sports predictions, as you well know, are always terrible. But I am out of the political. At least while Trump's in office, I'm out of the.
But Mike,
political.
some of my predictions have worked out well, including
Yeah,
the fact you'd be
yeah,
homeless here.
Yeah, you're the first to remind us. I will predict that this will be our last show at COSI. We are moving from the Battelle studio at WOSU at COSI back to Ohio State University, and hopefully in a couple of years onto a bigger and better place. But we want to thank COSI for their landlordship and their partnership here. It's worked out very well. We'll be replaced by the American Museum of Natural History. So yes, public media is going to be replaced by dinosaurs. For our crew here at WSU at COSI, and for our panel, and for the mastodon who will sit in this seat coming up in a few months, I'm Mike Thompson. Have a good week.